The nice thing about conversations is that we all know what conversations should feel like. So when an AI agent doesn't do that, it's not really a good conversational interface.
What really happens when your polished, powerful AI agent finally meets a real, unpredictable user?
I need to replace my credit card. But what real customers, quick, I have a problem, my dog chewed my card. Systems need to do is what's called intent disambiguation. And that's a problem with most systems today, LLMs.
And what solution have you built around this to solve this particular issue?
Parlant, first of all, it wraps an LLM provider such as OpenAI or Anthropic, etc. But it starts you off with an AI agent that is more conversational. Now, the next thing that you would care about is how should the conversation unfold? And here is where we kind of look at things a different way. Now, we care about accuracy and behavioral precision, conformance, things of that nature. And
if you've ever asked why do bots still fail customers, this conversation is for you.
If you look again at most agents being built today, much like most of the old web apps built in the early 2000s, the UX was very crappy, right?
In fact, that's the core requirement of agents right now. In fact, that's the central piece which is missing right now. Hi, I'm Sandeep Sharma, Senior Director, Research and Advisory at AIM Research, which is a global analyst and advisory firm specializing in analytics, AI, and GCC tech ecosystems. And I am hugely excited to welcome you to yet another episode of the AIM podcast, where we will uncover one of the biggest unsolved problems in enterprise AI. What really happens when your polished, powerful AI agent finally meets a real, unpredictable user? Our guest today has decided that enough is enough in this particular space. I am excited to welcome Yam Marcovitz, who is the CEO and co-founder of Parlant. Parlant is an open source platform built from the grounds up to fix what's really broken in conversational AI. Backed by engineers from Microsoft and a team of NLP researchers from the Weizmann Institute, Parlant isn't just slapping an LLM onto the old chatbot flows. I think a majority of the enterprises and the AI teams are really doing that. Parlant is actually rethinking the whole architecture of enterprise conversations. And to tell you what, major banks and service providers are already taking notice. So in this session, we will talk about hallucinations, failure of scripted flows, and more importantly, how to tame LLMs without killing their creativity, and why trust, traceability, and behavior control matter more than ever. So if you've ever asked why do bots still fail customers, this conversation is for you. A very warm welcome to you, Yam. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Great. So, Yam, I think this is going to be a very interesting, very enlightening conversation. Before we actually get into all the technical challenges and all the architectural rethink, let's start with your story. So, what led you to start Parlant? What was the actual spark? What was the pain point that convinced you that this is a problem that is too big to ignore and you should do something about it?
First of all, myself, I've been basically programming from a young age. So you could say my mind has been kind of fashioned into a programmer's mindset for a long time now. And a programmer's mindset is one of the key things about it is you get used to control, to understanding, if this is the instruction I gave, this is always what's going to happen. So if you gave the wrong instruction, sometimes that's going to be a problem, but it's on you to give the right instruction. As long as you do that, you can expect that the results will be correct. Now, the last job I had before starting the company, starting Parlant, was actually, so I was working on operating systems for autonomous vehicles. It's funny, if you look at that use case, most software, if you look at its functional requirements, it says, for example, when you click this button, this thing should happen. But what you get with autonomous vehicles, you need a quality of the software that's called hard real time. What hard real time means is that the timing is part of the functional requirements of the software. To understand quickly why that matters is you think about, so you got a car and it has a camera, let's say maybe it's a Tesla, it's got a camera and it detects a human crossing the street in front of your car. Now, the question is not only whether it can correctly identify that it is a person, but also how long it takes it to identify that and hit the brake, right? And that's where you see what's called the hard real-time quality, where timing becomes a hard functional requirement. Now, if you look at those operating systems, That's pretty much like the extreme end of the spectrum in the whole software world when it comes to control, the requirement for control. And then, early 2023, when GPT-4 came out, and clearly I, along many other people, saw the potential. The first thing that I noticed coming from this background of needing a lot of control is that there's like very, very little control here, very little guarantee. And so I told myself, how can we create complex systems based on this? Because in order to create complex systems, you need to layer many bricks and like one brick on top of another. And when you can't trust each of the bricks you're laying down, then it makes it like you're basically building a castle in the air. It's very hard to build a complex system that does interesting things. And so that was, I would say, the spark of what led us to start thinking about Parlant and the control required in generative AI, and then specifically around the conversational use case.
So which year was this, Jan? This was 2024.
That was actually 2023 when we started.
23. Okay. Okay. So when you started in 2023, so you started with this vision to build complex systems, and obviously you had to uncover different layers. What is the current status of Parlant right now? So what solution, what is your value proposition for your customers?
Yeah. So let's start with the problem. Many people are able to build AI agents today. Also, customer-facing agents that have a conversation with customers, or sort of a conversation. I guess that's really where the problem is, that it rarely is a conversation. Most agents being built today are built around kind of like functional requirements that are thought of by engineers, which means, given this question, this is the correct answer.
Sure.
So the agent either gets the correct answer or it doesn't, and that's it. That's how
Sure.
most engineers are looking at it. However, what people tend to forget is that at the end of the day, what a customer-facing AI agent is a user interface into your business, into your product, right? It's just like a graphical user interface, except it's conversational now.
Sure.
So it's not enough to build a graphical user interface where there's a button somewhere on the system that does the right thing. The button needs to be placed at the right place at the right time so that the customer sees it and gets value out of it, right? Is able to press it at the right time. And it's the same applies to a conversational interface, which slowly and gradually more people are starting to finally recognize. Now, if you look again at most agents being built today, much like most of the old web apps built in the early 2000s, the UX was very crappy, right? And I mean, sadly, it's kind of the same, but understandably kind of the same when technology is new with agents. So people would ask, would come in, say, report some type of a problem or need that they have, and the AI agent would respond in some way that's very far from optimal. A quick example is you ask a question about what does a certain button do. What you get back is an entire scroll of explanations and links and who knows what, right? And users don't like that. I mean, I don't like that as a user myself. And if you look at how most users are interfacing and interacting with those agents, they actually end up abandoning them. It's just not helpful. It's not a good interface. That's what it is. And so what you need to do in a conversational interface is have a conversation. You need to, first of all, empathize and connect with the user, and then gradually lead them along a certain path that will get them to their desired outcome. And the thing about conversations, you don't have to reinvent it. The nice thing about conversations is that we all know what conversations should feel like. So when an AI agent doesn't do that, it's not really a good conversational interface. It's something that responds in text, but it's not a conversational interface. And we need to start getting there where the interface does as people would expect from a human agent that would be helping them.
Sure. And what solution have you built around this to solve this particular issue?
Yeah. So what Parlin does fundamentally is it tries to, first of all, start you off with an agent. I mean, Parlin, first of all, it wraps an LLM provider such as OpenAI or Anthropic, etc. But it starts you off with an AI agent that is more conversational. Now, the next thing that you would care about is how should the conversation unfold? And here is where we we kind of look at things a different way from how most people so far have been building agents. So most people will say, well, the LLM is able to have conversations, which is an overstatement. So they reason that all the LLM needs is to be fed with the right contextual data. So if the customer asks a question about a certain topic, the LLM needs to be fed with the answer at the right time. And then they suppose that the LLM would conduct the interaction effectively from that point. But that doesn't happen. Now, what's interesting here is that if you ask, I mean, at least in my experience, if you ask most engineers, was the interaction of good quality, they would say yes. But most business experts looking at the interaction would say, no, we can't deploy this. This is really poor.
Okay.
And then the question would be from the engineer to the business expert. So how do you want it to behave, right? What do you want the conversation to look like? And then the business expert would have that feedback for you, for the engineer.
Sure.
And what do you do? Today, it's actually very hard. It's a hard problem to solve to get the LLM to behave as most business experts would want them to. And what Parlant does is it allows you to bridge that gap very efficiently, very simply. So when a business expert comes and says, and when a user wants to, let's say it's a banking agent wants to make a transaction, or a healthcare agent wants to get the status of their latest examination or something like that, the business expert would say, first you ask them this detail, then you ask them that detail, and then you go and fetch the data. And if the data is of such and such a nature, this is how you present it. Otherwise, that's how you present it. You may need to follow up this way if that's the case. Otherwise, that way. Those types of things. And Parlant is essentially like a control mechanism that allows you to express the structure and these business needs into the agent so that even if you have hundreds of those, it still follows them reliably and consistently. That's basically the value proposition of Parlant.
That's wonderful. In fact, that's the core requirement of agents right now. In fact, that's the central piece which is missing right now. And we will talk more about this, but as customers, how do we consume your solutions? Is it mostly as a platform? Do you have how should customers look at Parlant as a solution? A platform, a software solution, or do you offer services? Right now, there are many software companies, platform companies, which essentially provide services for the intake, for the uptake of their platforms, because the platform is right now very difficult for enterprises to work along with. So what most platform companies and software companies do is help the enterprise customers with services. And over a period of time, there is a fair bit of comfort and learning curve which is accomplished for the platform. So what is the situation in case of Parlant right now?
Yeah, great question. So where I'd like to start is that we approach it from a different, if you will, ideological standpoint.
Sure.
So you do have, many products out there today that help you create different kinds of AI agents.
Sure.
But in our experience, building a really effective AI agent, something that will actually give you business returns, that is actually still a hard task. So there are many products out there today where you may sign up, pay X dollars per month, be able to write a prompt, and then they basically give you an agent that tries to stick to that prompt. And the results are, again, very inconsistent. Now, we care about accuracy and behavioral precision, conformance, things of that nature. And it turns out that to do that, it's a technical challenge. And you need engineers to be involved in the process if you want to get high quality results. That's our fundamental assumption
Okay.
and belief. And so because you have to have engineers in the process, our company was founded by engineers. So both founders, myself and my co-founder, are engineers from a young age. And so in our opinion, if you're basically building an AI agent product on top of an infrastructure to adopt an infrastructure that's a black box is, even if you're not even talking about AI, it's already a problem because there's very little control and transparency that you have over it. Now, the thing is, when it comes to AI and generative AI in particular, so many things can go wrong. We're talking about the domain of semantics, and that's really complex.
Sure.
And it's largely uncharted when it comes to automating it, right? And so having that added layer of opaqueness where you can't understand what's going on, you can't fine tune it, you can't debug it, reason about it, etc. In our opinion, is just an irresponsible decision for a technical leader to make. And for that reason, we said Parlant, it should be a standardized open source architecture for getting conversational agents under control.
Okay.
And there should be as little in your way as an engineer as possible to figuring out how to get it to work properly. And so that's why Parlant is basically free and open source from that ideological standpoint. And on top of that, what we know with Parlant is that at the end of the day, and we see that with so many organizations, business experts and developers, ultimately, they don't like that feedback cycle where, every other day they're like, the agent needs to say something a little bit different in this particular scenario. And then the engineer's backlog starts filling up with, dozens, if not hundreds, of very small requests that from an engineer's perspective are, sometimes they might even look trivial or nonsensical or cosmetic and things like that, that engineers, honestly, it's not what engineers like to do. They'd rather, write interesting algorithms and optimize models and things of that nature. And so that's an inefficient feedback cycle, and we knew that was going to happen. So we designed Parlant to basically lend itself to a graphical user interface on top of it that business experts could use to directly control the agent's behavior in most cases, independently of not having to go through developers. And so if you want to look at Parlant as a platform, then you would look at the wider offering around it, which is, by the way, we expect to release quite soon to launch that graphical platform. But the engine itself is open source and as open as we can get it to be, basically.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. And I have a question regarding the initial traction that you've had so far. Could you give me some sense of some customers? It's okay if you don't want to take names, but if you can just give me some idea of the initial traction that you've had so far. What kind of industry verticals are you working with? Where are you seeing traction?
Yeah, so the companies that reach out to us tend to be from regulated industries. So we've had reach outs from healthcare companies, from consulting and law firms. But I would say and that's like both of those are about half of the companies. And then I would say other 30% would be financial companies. So companies offering like banking services, credit cards, things like that. And then there are more kind of like solutions that people are building out in the wild. So one company building a conversational agent for civil engineering, a big civil engineering enterprise. And so you got all these kind of long tail
Oh,
companies as well.
that's wonderful. That's wonderful. In fact, I'm hugely excited to hear about some of the conversations that you've had. We'll not take names, obviously, but we will talk about specific challenges and the solutions that you're offering to them for their specific challenges. In fact, I was speaking to a bunch of CDOs and chief data scientists last Friday, and most of them were from a financial services space. Most of them are based in Bangalore. And most of these organizations are working with customer service kind of use cases. In fact, for a B2C kind of an environment, Yam, and these banks and financial services firms, they work with actually huge volumes of transactions. They serve multi-million customers, sometimes even more than 200 million customers, 300 million customers. I'm talking about larger banks and financial
Yeah.
services firms. And the workload that the customer service teams have in some of these organizations, you should actually talk to them. They were voicing some of the concerns that they have for customer service, and I can completely resonate with what you're saying. I think all these are specific challenges that all of these scientists and engineers are facing with regards to customer service. I will just ask one quick question regarding Parlant, and then we can deep dive into some of the specific challenges with conversational AI. Why is it broken? So, in terms of your presence and in terms of your focus markets, So where are you present right now? Are you based out of Israel right now? And are you looking at, let's say, the US market to begin with? What markets do you want to focus on?
Yeah, I mean, primarily most of our activity, we are based in Israel, and primarily most of our activity thus far has been with US companies, although some of them have R&D centers in India, in Bangalore, actually. I was there recently.
Okay, wonderful. So did you like Bangalore? So
I
what,
did. I loved it.
wow,
I was,
wow, wonderful,
yeah.
wonderful. So the weather in Bangalore is absolutely fantastic. Did you like the
Yeah.
food here in Bangalore?
I mean, I did, although I have to admit, I only ate at the friend's house and at the hotel, but the food was amazing.
Okay, wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful. Okay, so we should catch up next time you're here in Bangalore. I will take you to
Yeah.
some very good restaurants. I
I'll
can
try
make
to
you
hold
try
you to
very good
it.
South Indian food. Yeah, wonderful. Okay, so let's switch gears, Yam. Let's talk about some specific problems. And you already briefly mentioned about some of the key issues that are there in the area of conversational AI. And you remember I was telling you about some of the discussions that I was having with the head chief data scientist, CDOs last Friday. So the common theme that is there is that they have tried a chatbot. The customer still asking up for a human in the loop kind of a mechanism. Why is it that after throwing LLMs into the mix, most of the AI agents still disappoint users?
Yeah. And you know, it's interesting. Um, so some of the companies that we're working with, especially like, as you said, the large enterprises that have basically been automating millions of conversations monthly for several years now, actually, even before LLMs, because you could still create AI agents before LLMs with transformer models and other NLP techniques, just not LLMs. Um, so if you look at their kind of failure modes in production, you find things that are not just like it's not a matter of whether the conversation was appeared natural or not. And actually, if you actually look at what's going on in these organizations, many of the large ones have what they call conversation designers. So these are actually experts that understand the psychology of interaction, and particularly in the field of AI, and they design conversations to feel as efficient and effective and as nice and possible for the customer. And again, that's even before LLMs. So the conversations, they kind of follow a pretty good flow many times. The problem is that customers, they often come in and they're like, they're not. So the way most people, even using LLMs today, they're saying, well, let's recognize the customer's intent and route that to the right tool, right? Let's say the user wants to make a transaction, we route that to the right tool, right? Now, the problem is some customers will come into your chatbot and say, let's say they want to replace their credit card, let's say, right? They might come in and say, good morning, I need to replace my credit card. And then your intent recognition would see that and route that to the right tool. But what real customers say, they come in and they say, uh, quick, I have a problem, my dog chewed my card,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And so a lot of what those systems need to do is what's called intent disambiguation.
Sure,
Um, and and again, that's a problem with most systems today. LLMs, yes, they give you that more natural interface. They give you a better understanding of customer intent, but they still depend on the business experts to understand how to map what they know about their customers to the right business logic,
sure,
essentially. Right?
sure.
So
And
hopefully that
yeah,
starts answering.
actually answers this question. And let me just add another point. If you're looking at English speaking countries, intent disambiguation is a difficult problem to solve. But if you're looking at maybe if you add the layer of languages, so maybe if you look at French or Spanish, or if you look at the large list of languages that we have for the Indian markets, Chinese markets, Japanese markets, look at the intent disambiguation that companies would face. And we're talking about multinational financial services firms that have customers across globally, across all of these countries. So just look at the level of challenges that all of these organizations have to face. These are
Yeah.
amazing. These are difficult challenges, difficult problems to solve for some of these banks and financial services firms, retail firms, and so on and so forth. Uh, So you actually rightly pointed out the fact that in real world support conversations, the customers don't talk in order. They jump ahead. They mix a lot of issues. They sometimes don't use the right keywords as well. They just vent their frustrations out. That's the normal way of conversing with any business. So and you briefly touched upon this point as to why traditional flow based bots sometimes maybe even the LLM based ones they still collapse. So I think let's jump the guns to maybe another issue, which is with regards to risks and hallucinations. So when we are talking about all of these larger banks and financial services firms, Yam, so even a 1% hallucination rate could mean potentially, let's say, thousands of potential failures, and that too almost every single day. So, for example, a bank which handles almost like 1 million support queries a day. These are some of the largest banks. A 1% hallucination rate could mean about 10,000 potential failures for them. So how do you deal with hallucinations? How do you deal with the business risks that they pose? What's the realistic fix for this kind of exposure?
When it comes to hallucinations or essentially any type of mistake that an LLM would make. And by the way, people talk about hallucinations, but there are all types of mistakes, critical mistakes that an LLM can make. For example, it might do something out of order, which can be a big problem, right? Like agreeing to do something before it went through the right identification process or authorization process or something like that. So hallucinations are only part of it. Um, so instead of talking about hallucinations, we call it the problem of alignment versus misalignment, right? Did it do what you want or did it do something else? Now, there are two critical factors to look at when you talk about agentic misalignment. Number one is the frequency of error, right? That's what most people would call accuracy, like, it's 80% accuracy, 90% accuracy. So that means that 80% of the time or 90% of the time, it's doing the right thing, something that business experts are looking at and improving. Obviously, what we want to do is push that as far as we can to 100. And the main reason for that is, like you said, so if you're working with a bank, for example, the bank is running anywhere between 2 and 10 million conversations per month. If you get even, suppose you hit 99.9% accuracy, like you said, that's still 1 in 1,000 mistakes. Out of 10 million conversations per month, that's potentially a lot of issues.
Right.
So now the big question becomes not so much the rate of error, but
Mhm.
another thing, which is the magnitude of the error. How big is the error? How critical is the error? And that's where I think not as many people are it's something not many people are looking at today
Mhm.
sufficiently. But that's really where the big issue is, the magnitude of the error. And that's
Sure.
something that uh, we've basically built Parlant to support for those regular use cases that do run millions of conversations per month. So that, yes, you are trying at the same time to reduce the frequency of mistakes, but you know for sure that not even 1 in 10 million conversations will it do something that is really harmful, the type of thing that can get your company into legal issues or get it on the news or something like that.
Okay, wonderful. So, in fact, I am tempted to ask you as to specific solutions that you're offering around this, because you rightly pointed out that the error rate might not be that important, because when we're looking at high volume kind of businesses, B2C businesses, obviously the magnitude, the quantum of errors, I think that is also very, very important. So would it be possible for you, Yam, to explain to me and the audience as to, and if you could get, use some example as to how you're trying to address this particular issue? What are the different capabilities in your platform, in the engine, that can help address this specific issue?
Yeah, they're actually, I mean, much of Parlant is built to fix those issues because it's not something that you kind of put a band-aid on. You have to,
Sure.
from scratch, from the ground up, think about how you're going to architect your agentic application. So everything that Parlant does is oriented toward achieving that goal. So there are
Mhm.
multiple tools in there. But I can tell you, I can give you one classic example, something that is an innovation of Parlant, a unique feature of Parlant. This is something that we call canned responses.
Okay.
Now, people who are a little bit familiar with call centers, the way it works in call centers is a single agent might be handling multiple customers at the same time. And so what they need is efficiency, right? The more customers you're able to, resolve their issues, the better that you're doing. And so those agents, they have like a pre-prepared set of responses that are brand aligned, are legally approved, and all of that. So when something comes up in a customer conversation, instead of starting to type or thinking about what to say, they can pick one and send it. And those are, they're well phrased and all that. They're contextual, so it works. The customer is still, and again, that's how customer service is actually being operated today anyway. So customers are getting what they want.
Okay.
And we've actually taken that idea and implemented it into a Parlant agent. It is an optional feature for the more regulated industries. Now, if you talk about how those canned responses work, that's where it starts getting even more interesting, where you start seeing the opportunities unfold.
Okay.
So, number one, you will never get subtle hallucinations such as the agent making something up that doesn't exist, right?
Okay.
Because all of your responses have been pre-approved by, let's say,
Sure.
conversation designers that you're hiring or business experts who have gone through the list and approved each one. However you choose to do it, you know that anything that the customer sees will have been pre-approved. So that's guarantee number one. But then there is another interesting thing. So if you look at common failure modes of agents, there are some things that are very common and yet are very, very critical. For example, an agent might tell you that a transaction has been made when it wasn't, or not tell you that the transaction has been made when it was. That's something very, very common. And the way we solve that with canned responses is, and this is getting a little bit technical, but essentially canned responses can reference particular contextual data that the agent either has or doesn't have in its context. So if, for example, you have a canned response that says transaction successful, right? That refers to a particular contextual data item that gives you the successful transaction ID. The way Parlant works is it will never be able to choose that particular response if you don't have that data in your context. And the only way you'd have that data in your context is if you actually ran the API call that would give you that.
Sure.
So that translates into if a transaction wasn't made, the agent is never going to say it. So that's kind of like one of the features that we have in place that effectively get you to a reliable and safe to deploy agent.
Okay.
But again,
That's wonderful.
it's only like one of a more comprehensive set of features around this.
Sure, definitely. So we will talk more about features in the subsequent sections. But I think that's an interesting point. So I think the canned responses that you're talking about, that's very important, especially in the overall business context for even for larger organizations. So now, Yam, I think let's add some bit of fun into our conversation. So we will have the rapid fire segment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to present before you, mention to you maybe some challenges, and I'm going to ask whether these challenges are easy fixes or hard fixes. And when we say easy fix or quick fix, you could say that this is a quick fix or an easy fix with Parlant, and you could provide maybe a one or two line explanations. And whenever there's a specific challenge which according to you is a hard fix, you could mention that it needs deeper organizational efforts and resources. So maybe you could provide another one line explanation for why you are mentioning that this is a hard fix. Does this
So we
sound?
got
Yeah.
just either easy fix or hard fix. That's
Either
what we
easy
have,
fix or
or
hard
no
fix,
fix, or
or
no fix, I
no
guess.
no fix as well. So no fix is again a hard fix, right?
Okay.
Okay. So we will start. So the first challenge for you is preventing hallucinations.
I would say fairly easy fix.
Fairly easy fix with Parlant. I think you've already talked about that as well. Okay, great. In specific customer conversations, conversational AI kind of use cases, the challenge of maintaining tone, brand, and compliance.
Easy fix. So just briefly, you can use canned responses in a few ways. One is you only use the canned responses, which means that, again, a designer has ensured that they align with your brand tone of voice. But another way you can use canned responses is what we call composited mode, where essentially you let the LLM say what it wanted to say versus like not the canned responses for slightly less regulated industries. But you can tell the LLM to copy the style of the canned responses that are matched in context. So you can get the LLM to be like maximum fluid, but in your tone of voice.
Okay, wonderful. And all of that takes care of compliance as well, right?
For true compliance at very large scale, you would have to go with what we call strict mode, strict canned response mode.
Okay, fine. Okay, so now let me give you a curveball. Very, very difficult. I think this is one of the key issues that many organizations face. How do you integrate with legacy backend infrastructure?
Yeah, we actually released a quite informative blog post on the topic called Agentic Backends.
Mm-hmm.
It's on Parlant's website. So essentially, I would say I personally, I would say easy fix for a developer. It would be an easy fix, but you can't simply integrate. You cannot simply integrate an LLM with most existing APIs. You have to have an adaptation layer between them because LLMs think about APIs in a different way than humans do. When I say LLMs, I mean like modern foundation models and the way they're trained. So you have to have an adaptation layer in between. But that's very easy to do with Parlant on the other hand. So.
I think the audience would be interested to know slightly more about the adaptation layer and how Parlin could help them. So, would you please explain as to what this adaptation layer is?
Yeah, there's a number of aspects to it. I'll touch on maybe one or two things, but again, you can go on the Parlant website and look at the Agentic Backends blog. It's
Sure.
called something like "What I Wish Someone Told Me About Agentic API Design." So one of the things is that when you're working with a human developer, suppose you have an API and you're working with a human developer that needs to consume it, use it properly. What happens is the human developer looks at the API documentation, tries it out a few times, gets it right, and then deploys it to production. And every time it runs in production, it always runs in exactly the same way, which is up to date and correct to the letter, which is incredibly important when you talk about API usage. It cannot be approximate. However, with an LLM, it is an AI, which means it's based on machine learning and statistics. So you won't get it right 100% of the time. You just simply won't. And so what you need to do is you need to think about how it gets things wrong and what happens then and how can you minimize, like how can you look at the distribution of options that come out of the LLM and support as many of those as possible. Um, so if you need to design an API like that, for example, a parameter cannot have a simple like programming language type and schema and all that. You have to think of it kind of like a query because
Sure.
every time the LLM might give you something a little bit different. Maybe 9 times out of 10 it gives you the right thing, but again, that's really far from being acceptable at a very large scale, which is what
Sure.
we want to support. So you just have to think about the API differently. But again,
Okay.
to go into more of the details of that gets quite technical, and it's all on the blog.
Sure. Understood. So I would request the audience to look at the agentic backend article or blog that is there on the Parlant website. I have another very, very difficult one for you, something that has really frustrated all the data scientists at all of these larger organizations. And that is explaining the decisions of the bots, the agentic decisions. Is it an easy fix or a hard fix?
I'm a bit on the fence here. So if you look at, I would say if you look at understanding agent or LLM decisions, there are kind of multiple ways that you can think about their decision-making process. So the hard one is it's just a statistical machine, and it's very hard to think in kind of abstract terms about its reasoning process because it doesn't have a reasoning process, right? So fundamentally, there is no reasoning process. Now, that's kind of like an academic concern, I would say. But what most companies care about, what most developers will care about is not the academic concern, is how can they actually understand what's happening and fix things 99% of the time. And that's something that is basically baked into Parlant. And the way it's baked is every decision a Parlant agent makes is visible in logs. Every decision comes with basically a rationale for the decision. And why that's important, because it's first of all, it's not hard to get a rationale out of large language models. But why that's important, really, from a product standpoint, from a development lifecycle standpoint, it's important because many of the failures will not come from the model itself. They will come from ambiguous instruction. And it can be very hard to anticipate what instruction is ambiguous or not until you've seen the failure mode. It's very hard to choose our words wisely when we're talking about automating millions of conversations, right?
Oh,
And so you have to work with that feedback cycle, and that's why it's built into Parlant. So you can say, for example, I'll give you a funny example, okay? Something that we do encounter.
sure.
You may tell the agent, I'll give you a couple funny examples. One is you may tell the agent, ask the user for the date of departure if they're booking a flight.
Okay.
So the agent asks, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then the user, for some reason, once in a while, a user will ignore that question and ask something else and then come back to it, right? But you've told the agent at this point is where you ask this question until you get this information from the user. And so what we saw was we told the agent to ask, and then the user ignored, and then the agent just gave up, stopped asking. And we were able to look at the rationale of its decision because it's all provided in Parlant. And we saw that the LLM said, well, you told me to ask, and I asked. I already asked.
Yeah, sure.
So the user didn't answer, but you didn't tell me to get that information. You just told me to ask. And why that's interesting is because it's essentially it's not an algorithmic issue. It's essentially an element of human machine interaction,
Sure.
right? Because if you say, well, you know what I mean, right? You knew what I mean. Why are you being you know
Completely
being funny?
understand. Yeah. Yeah, sure.
But the problem is that sometimes you would have wanted it to not take you literally, but if you allow it that kind of freedom, then that's going to come back and bite you at scale also. So you have to you have to choose your words carefully, basically. And in order to do that, you have to be able to see how it actually interpreted the situation and your instructions.
Wonderful. In fact, Yam, again, so in my interactions over the last month or so with some of the CDOs, I think across a set of use cases, maybe in risk and compliance, or even maybe for different operations, maybe related to different products. For example, in loan origination journeys or in loan management journeys, or even let's say in user journeys for different kind of products for financial services firms, or even in product recommendations for retail and wholesale firms, e-commerce firms. I think explaining bot decisions is a critical aspect, and more so in regulated industries like financial services, healthcare, and telecommunications. So that was one of the key challenges which was pointed out by the CDOs of all these companies based in regulated industries. But it's good to know that obviously Parlant has some capabilities which can actually look at the rationale that the agent has taken, and then obviously uh, it is up to the developers as to how they will actually look at human machine interactions, as you said, right? So that's good to know. I just have one more challenge, quick fix and hard fix, supporting 10 plus languages.
I would say fairly easy with large foundation models. I mean,
Okay.
it depends on the languages. If one of the 10 is a very non uncommon language, then maybe it'll have more difficulty with that.
Okay, fine. Understood. So we'll move on to the next segment, Yam. So one of the key questions that enterprise teams, one of the key challenges that they have is that they want their bots to sound human, but you touched upon this particular topic is that the developers want to stay in control. So how do you turn this game of endless prompt tweaks and flow edits into a process where the design teams can, work and scale safely without playing prompt whack-a-mole?
Yeah. So when we were first trying to envision what would be a good way to think about Parlant's architecture, we actually, the way we ended up doing it was the third way that we thought about. The first way we thought about it was just essentially like a system prompt, right? Where you say, then that's where you do kind of like the prompt whack-a-mole thing, where you have like a God prompt that contains all of your instructions. The problem is it doesn't, once you pass a certain number of instructions, which is actually quite small, it's about 5 or 6, you will stop getting consistent behavior. And so now the problem is, how do you take that business feedback and implement it more consistently? And that's where we consider the second option of building it, which is what many people are actually doing these days, i.e. graphs or flowcharts,
Sure.
saying like, here is, you're at this stage of the process, you need to ask this, after this, the user will say that, and then you need to say this. The big problem here, and fortunately, we understood it quite early, by the way, by talking to experienced conversation designers, is that users will break those patterns very, very frequently. So I think the numbers that I'm seeing from clients is about 90% of the time, users will break the design structure. So that translates to very little containment or user engagement. And so that's why we also gave up on this approach. And yet we still needed to solve the problem of how would a business expert give that feedback? How would a business expert express what they want the agent to do? And then it turns out that if you kind of get a business expert to sit and think, oh, what should my agent's instructions be? That becomes very, very problematic. It's very hard to do. People will get into analysis paralysis. So what you need to do is get into an iterative feedback cycle where you start out with something and then you polish it up as you go. You refine it as you go. We kind of view it as kind of like the sculptures approach to AI agents, but really that's how most software products work anyway. And so we just kind of sat and stared at conversations, at AI conversations for a while until we realized, you know what? The vast majority of times where it did something we didn't like, we are able to look at it and say, this is what it did wrong, and this is what it should have done, as well as in this particular set of circumstances. So let's say sometimes you need to say, here is where you should try to be apologetic and offer the customer a discount, so as not to lose them, right? But you shouldn't always offer them that discount. And so we're always able to basically say, in this particular scenario, this is what you do. You don't want to have to do it for every single thing the agent does, which is why you use an LLM to start off somewhere, which is already a fairly wide, fairly wide baseline. But anytime that you see something you don't like, you should be able to say, here's the set of circumstances, and here's what it should have done in this set of circumstances. So that's basically what you have there is a condition that applies to the current state of the conversation, and then an action that nudges the agent's behavior toward your desired behavior. So in Parlant, that's what we call guideline. A guideline has a condition and an action. And the entire Parlant engine is built around this concept of guidelines, of conditional matching of instructions. Sure. And the way, again, the way those instructions are given make it very easy for business experts to come in and implement their desired behavior. Say, here's when you should operate this way next. And you can do that hundreds of times if you need to.
Okay. Wonderful. So Yam, I think I had questions regarding, let's say, nuanced conversations, right? If a customer is angry, then obviously the right tone matters. And we should actually look at empathy or escalation or reassurance. And this is one area where most of the bots gets this horribly wrong. And I think you've broadly touched upon this, but would you like to actually use some customer example and give us an idea as to how Parlant ensured emotional intelligence and brand alignment, and especially in sensitive situations? Maybe through an example. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll say a few things. The first thing is that these things can often change not just from culture to culture, but also one group of people to another. Detecting emotional tone is something that's not just hard for AI to do. At the end of the day, AI is trying to mimic human behavior.
Sure.
So fundamentally it's something that's hard for many people to do as well, right? So
Absolutely.
that's where the core of the problem is, that it's just a hard problem when all you're dealing with is text. I mean, we know, if you interact with colleagues over textual channels, there's a much greater chance of misunderstanding each other and things like that.
Okay.
But if you are able to come in and say, you know what, this is sarcastic, right? Then that basically means that you have an example at hand. So you can come in and say, give a guideline. If the customer is sarcastic, for example, X or Y, and that's not going to be perfect precisely because your understanding of it is not perfect. But you can still implement at least what your understanding of it is using those guidelines. Now, where that, I kind of had another funny example of where, you think about things as an engineer. So you say my agent should follow rules, but then it ends up doing something silly that as an engineer you probably would never have thought of. So we encountered an example like this in our first months of working with this. So we had an agent that was selling food, right? Making food orders.
Okay.
And we had many guidelines, but two of them were so when the customer wants a Coca-Cola, tell them that we don't carry Coke. We actually have Pepsi. So offer a Pepsi instead of the Coke, right? Happens
Sure.
at a lot of places.
Yes.
And then we also had another guideline that says if a customer is becoming noticeably upset, then apologize and tell them that you will immediately escalate the conversation to a manager.
Okay.
Also very reasonable, right?
Absolutely. Was this
And
was this customer in the US?
this was a test scenario.
Okay. Okay.
So the customer was in Israel.
Okay. Okay. Wonderful.
But what we encountered was if you came in and said, I want for drinks, I'll have a Coke. And then the agent says, we don't carry Coke, but I can offer you a Pepsi instead. And then, apparently a lot of people really, really hate Pepsi. I'm not one of them. I like Pepsi. But some people get upset. Like I've seen it. Some people get upset if a store only carries Pepsi and not Coke.
Okay.
So we simulated that. So the customer came in and said, "What do you mean you don't carry Coke? What kind of a store doesn't carry Coke? What is this?"
Okay.
And then again, like rule following mindset. So the agent saw many guidelines, and among them, those two. If a customer is upset, that triggered. So
Sure.
the agent's response ended up being, "I'm really sorry to have upset you. I will immediately escalate the situation to a manager. In the meantime, can I offer you a Pepsi?" And and the reason it did that was because that rule still applied. The customer is still interested in a Coke, so it still needs to offer Pepsi. And that's a little bit like that shows a little bit of the complexity of understanding which instructions should match and when should they stop. Like when should an agent persist with a request? When should it let it go? When one instruction should be prioritized over another. So for example, if the customer is upset, that should probably be prioritized over anything else in trying to help them at that point. These are things that are hard to get an LLM to do reliably, but that Parlant is designed to allow you to do, to model the behavior so that it behaves exactly the way that you expect in those scenarios.
Okay, that's wonderful. In fact, when you were talking about this specific trial use case, this actually leads us to the rapid fire segment, which is future or fantasy. So, can an AI agent sell multiple products, and how can it respond to customer requests? How can it detect customer tone, customer behavior, and really understand whether the customer is upset or not? So, we will come to this rapid fire segment, Yam. So I'm naming this rapid fire segment as reality, future, or fantasy. So reality is some use case where you see AI agents actually carrying out some of these tasks already. And future use case, you can actually say that these agents will be able to carry out these tasks maybe in the next 2 to 3 years. And fantasy is like total BS, and AI agents will not be able to do this kind of work, maybe ever. So, reality, future, or fantasy. So, I'll start with the use cases. And the first one is actually very similar to the test case that you mentioned. So, can an AI agent upsell maybe while resolving a support issue?
Yeah, definitely. I
That
mean, if there's customer interest and it brings up the right thing at the right time, which you can get it to do, then for sure.
in your observations right now, in your customer conversations, have you actually seen some of these kind of agents which organizations have
Um,
actually deployed?
Yeah, so we're looking at a few interesting use cases where, for example, so you can, again, with Parlant, you can lead a conversation a certain way
Hmm.
dynamically. And then you can say, once it reaches this particular state, that's when you bring something up, right? So, for example, if a customer is looking at comparing financial services, let's say,
Hmm.
like business capital or something like that, you can help them compare various things. And then when you've established buying intent or something close to that, then you can say, actually, here's a recommendation for you,
Okay.
right? And you can recommend something of your choice.
Okay. Okay. And by when do you think that we can reasonably work on this particular use case? Organizations can actually look at this. Is it a
We're actually
reality
already
now?
we're actually already working on that with one of our clients.
Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. So I think this may have mixed reactions from the customer service people, the sales people as well, globally. But okay, so we will move on to the next use case, which is the agent actually negotiates pricing based on the LinkedIn profile. So the agent will go to LinkedIn, check the profile, and then negotiate pricing. Is that something that can be done?
Yeah, I mean, if so that takes business expertise to understand how to conduct that negotiation. Actually, so one of our clients is working on a negotiation agent, although not for pricing, for something else. And so, yes, negotiations are possible. It's possible for the agent to retrieve that context. Using something like Parlant, it's possible for it to very consistently apply your business rules to that and then conduct the conversation accordingly. So I would say that's a reality.
Okay. So now I have a very fantastic use case, and I'm really using that word fantastic in the literal sense of the word. Gen AI clone of a CEO doing real-time investor calls.
Fantasy.
Fantasy. Okay.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, I'm not gonna say it's not gonna happen in the next 20 years, but we're far. So some people are saying, oh, GPT-4 is like this much powerful, GPT-5 is gonna be that. It doesn't work that way. There are certain
yeah,
natural upper bounds to the type of technology that we're working with. We're gonna need major fundamental breakthroughs to allow something like that to happen. At
okay.
least on a level that CEOs such as myself would actually use if they're in the right minds, I would say.
Okay.
So I would say that's fantasy right now.
Okay. The next one is a multilingual bot that detects sarcasm and tone.
Yeah, again, that's possible as long as somebody is able to teach it what sarcasm looks like, and to the extent that the person teaching is correct themselves.
Okay. And the last one is a customer support agent that fixes backend issues on its own.
That can happen, but you would have to classify exactly what types of backend issues. If it's something more complex, I would never let it do that. The system is not like the technology is not geared toward precision.
Okay.
Right. So programming is something that requires incredible precision. Yet there are some tasks that don't require that level of precision, or another way to look at it is if a task is not consequential and that you can try things out a little bit and give it to a customer, say, hey, do you think this is working now? And if it's not crucial that it's absolutely correct, if it looks better, then you're kind of fine to go ahead with it and maybe fix it again later. For those types of things which do occur in a standard software development life cycle, that is, I would say, already a reality, or at
Okay.
least an achievable reality.
Okay. So, Jan, I think we are at the last segment of our conversation. And so far, it has been really enlightening, even for me. I've really looked at a lot of topics. We have discussed a lot of topics, a lot of themes with regards to agents and LLMs. So, a couple of questions in the last segment for you. So, uh, let's look at enterprise customers and they want to start, or maybe they want to relook at their conversational AI journey. What are some of the top two or three things, top two or three considerations and your recommendations to some of these enterprises about rewiring their conversational AI programs. How should they look at rewiring their conversational AI programs?
Well, I'll give you a bit of an unpopular opinion on this, unfortunately. Um, here's the thing, and unfortunately, I know this too as a CEO in this market. The amount of uh, low quality information, in some cases, misleading, intentionally misleading information, uh, so vastly outweighs the amount of good information, as well as the good information is often not the first thing you think about, and is, you kind of need to dig into it a little bit to understand that it is good information. Yet, if you don't take that approach, you will just not succeed. You will not get the results that you want. You will actually not even get close to it or something good enough. You probably just won't make it to production, or you will deploy something to production that is not good. Okay. And that is happening all the time. I mean, you think about all of the noise in the AI market, yet how many enterprise conversational agents that are really worthy of the name LLM powered have you used? Personally, I haven't used even one today in production like that. And so that tells you something. That tells you that there's a very, very big gap between the expectations that vendors are establishing in the market so that people buy the product versus the reality. Now, we're a technical team, right? So we're mostly focused on real outcomes. We're not salespeople. I mean,
Sure.
you could probably, I mean, some people, they say they can see that on me in like 5 minutes, which is maybe both a blessing and a curse.
Sure.
But I would say if you're serious about it, um, don't go for the first thing you see. You got to try to talk to somebody who's actually done it. Ideally, I would say talk to someone who's not trying to sell you something.
Sure.
Talk to somebody who's done it and not trying to sell you something. Or if they are trying to sell you something, bring an expert so as to judge what they're giving you as proof that it's possible. And that's the first thing I would do. So if you're getting a call from from a VC friend where one of their portfolio companies is doing this or that, um, I would say don't jump straight into it. Try to talk to somebody who's neutral and can advise you on the topic and can tell you what to expect, what you should not expect. Uh, just as an example, my brother has a company, and I just talked to him a couple of days ago, and he told me what he wanted to achieve, and he talked to some AI companies, and they said, yeah, we can do all kinds of things, and I actually told him, look, what you need them to do, they're not going to be able to do. They're going to be able to do one small part of what you want, but that's actually not this consequential part for you. So definitely talk to somebody who has done what you're trying to achieve and is an expert on the topic.
Okay, wonderful. One last question for you. When we look at Parlant, and what's the outlook for Parlant? What are some of the key things that you would actually announce maybe in the next 12 to 18 months? What are some key capabilities that you're looking to offer to your potential customers?
Yeah. So fundamentally, what we're trying to do with Parlant, if you look at it from like a bottom line business perspective, is we're trying to increase what these organizations call containment or AI containment. What that means in practice is if you have, let's say, a call center right now for your customer service, you got tier one, tier two, maybe more agents. What you want to try to do where, by the way, tier one is like the standard agent that you get first on your call. They might be able to help you. They're good with like 80% of inquiries, the stuff that's very, very repetitive. But they don't have deep expertise. So if your inquiry is an edge case, you have to be transferred to a tier two agent, right? Now, there's a big problem with tier one agents. It's not a fun job. There's a lot of turnover in those jobs. Like people, they join, you train them, you invest the resources in training them. It's a very demanding and stressful job. People quit very frequently. So it's tricky, right? And that's something that really is kind of, I would say, screams for disruption. And I think that's what we should be trying to achieve with AI today, or we can try to achieve with AI today. And what we are trying to do is increase the containment of that AI tier 1 agent. Basically, by containment, we mean how many of the calls stay within that agent's domain and don't get transferred to a human agent or like a tier 2, and moreover, like a tier 2 human agent. And we're always looking at that, and we're working with some of our larger clients to look at the metrics over time and to understand the failure modes and to give them the tools that they need to address them so as to increase their overall containment. So I would say that's like our mission, basically.
Wonderful, wonderful. So in fact, that this has been a wonderful conversation, Yam, and this is a wrap. And big thanks to you, Yam, for explaining why most AI agents still act like confused interns with Wi-Fi issues. But the moral of the story for the audience here is that if your bot is offering refunds, discounts, emotional support all in one sentence, it is the time to call Parlant. So thanks for tuning in. And remember that if your chatbot starts hallucinating, don't panic, fire it, or better, retrain it. And you know whom to contact, right? So, Yam, thank you so much for taking out time. It has been a wonderful conversation. We have actually learned a lot about conversational AI, why LLM agents fail, and we have looked at a variety of themes and topics. Thank you so much for your time. I'm sure you must have enjoyed this conversation. Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and we will see you in the next episode of Simulated Reality by AIM. Thank you, Yann.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.